Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer. The show, we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become along the way. Now today, I am thrilled to welcome Chad Cooper. Chad is one of those individuals who has continuously raised the bar and pushed himself to be the very best that he can be. From being awarded both the Regimental Marine of the Quarter and Regimental Marine of the Year, to retiring from Microsoft at age 35, serving 2 terms as Mayor Pro Dom in his community, traveling the world and making a global impact through his foundation in New Zealand, and competing as a multi-major sponsored athlete. And last but not least, being a thriving family man, husband, and father, Chad truly embodies what it means to live a legendary life. So let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth.
Chad, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you today, my friend. I cannot wait to dive in.
Indeed. It's almost like we just talked yesterday. Oh, wait, we did talk yesterday. So
I know. Funny how that happens, isn't it?
we're like, yeah, we need to get that on. Oh, my marketing people already were on that. So I'm really excited to be able to carry on that quality conversation yesterday.
Me too, Chad. If you would, I would love if you would just share a little bit of your background, your transformational journey, what led you, where you started and what led you to where you are today, because you've done a tremendous amount and worked with some really high level, incredibly impactful people and become one yourself. So if you would, tell the audience, the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I would say starting early on, we get to formulate in life. And I would say a big influence in that, Zach, is that where we're born in the pecking order of siblings. If you have some, and I have a lot, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot. I was the youngest in one side, the second youngest in the other. And it kind of begins there with people of we decide who we are in the midst of that noise of family. Like the firstborn got all the photos, every single moment that they have. The second is like, okay, we got birthdays and holidays. The third is like, why are you even here? We're exhausted and we're done, right? So in some ways, like the youngest are the fighters,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're the ones that really kind of have to find their self-esteem, their self-confidence, because they're picked on. They, in some ways, not intentionally by parents, but there's so much going on. It's like, can we get rid of the fluff in all of the pieces that we get caught up in? And it's just brass tacks. And so with that comes a gift. Some unfortunately see that as a tragedy, right? And they go into victim mode. Oh, I was neglected. There's not as many. It's like, so it begins with, in life, we can choose, do we want to be a victim or do we want to be a victor? You can't do both. You have to choose one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of grew with the self-introspection, introvert that had to learn how to be an extrovert in order to thrive and get attention. Okay. So, 6 boys on one side, you're a fighter, right? You got to survive in that. On the other side, 3 sisters and the feminine. And so it really began, Zach, and the reason I'm sticking on that is because it's such a formative part. And I remember growing up having people go, oh, you're the victim of divorced parents. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not a victim. I get 4 parents to choose all the best characteristics and dump all the other stuff. You only get 2 or maybe 1, right? So like I had 4 parents that got to influence and say, if we're going to screw this kid up, we're going to gang up on him. And I rose to the difficulties. I rose through those and saw those as opportunities. And that would, I would say, be really kind of how I faced life. Whether that was being a mama's boy going in the Marine Corps in shell shock of, holy crap, these guys are going to turn me into a man and they're not going to be gentle and they're not going to be slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like just hardcore deep dive. And so that within that, through Microsoft, probably the hardest company to work for, get a job. I had 12 interviews, 3 hours each. That's a lot of interviewing. To today of just being an endurance athlete. And that's really kind of the story of my life, is the endurance. The tortoise wins the race over the rabbit, right? So I'm the slow, steady Eddie, unnoticed guy in the shadow that at the end people are like, how in the heck did he just get first place? Well, I can tell you because high performers leave clues, and I've captured those to help my clients.
Hmm. That's fascinating. There's two things I'd love to explore there. Is one, I mean, what sounds like transformative experience going from childhood through the Marines. And you said, something that you used language that was very interesting to me. You defined it as the process of becoming a man.
Mhm.
And I've been through my own personal development journey recently. I realized that, or one of the quotes that has had such a significant impact and influence on me is "Heal the boy, and the man will arise." And I think the majority of people, unfortunately, are spending their lives on autopilot, oftentimes in victimhood, and not really considering, are there past traumas, beliefs, ideologies, things that I've adopted, experiences that I've been through that are unconsciously driving my decisions and creating the life that I'm experiencing today. And for you, how did that transformation of becoming the man show up, and what were the gifts that the Marine Corps brought you? I mean, trying to think of a better way to articulate this question, but if you would expand on that, I would love to hear your perception.
Yeah, so it really comes down to whether we're going to use our past as an excuse, as a crutch, or as an explanation.
Mhm.
I had every excuse to be a drug addict, alcoholic, whatever, just give up on life to go, oh, you don't understand. This is the trauma and tragedy I've had in my life. Well, I would say every one of us, the path that we take is relatively unique to each person, but the obstacles we face are common to all. And so, I experienced trauma at a 10 out of 10 for me. To compare my trauma to yours, Zach, would just be a disservice to both of us, as if it's a badge of honor of, oh, your life is so crappy. Let me tell you how mine's much worse. Like I'm winning, right? So comparison is the thief of joy. And if we're going to compare, I learned to compare to my standards because they're way higher than society's, which is low. And
Mhm.
so I grew up with alcoholism. I grew up with child molestation. I've lost a child. I mean, you name it, I've probably faced just about every major obstacle. And I learned what was the gift in the midst of that pain. See, the stories about our past is what creates the suffering. So if we stop telling ourselves that the historical stories, we don't suffer and we can use the pain as a megaphone. And the
Mhm.
Marine Corps taught me, I had a drill instructor that said, pain is telling you to pay attention. It's telling you that you're still alive, right? And that really resonated with me. And they're like, we don't have the time to deal with the story. We're too busy turning you into a man by tearing down all of those limiting beliefs, by tearing down the identity of what you think you are. And there was a pivotal moment where I had the flu. And if you have the flu so bad, it comes out both ends and you just are really immobilized. They don't care. They had a unique way of handling the flu. And they said, drop in the barracks. I had to drop onto the concrete floor. And they're like, just start doing push ups. Now, you're not allowed to have in the Marines, you're not allowed to have a watch or any personal possessions. So you have no idea what the time is. Somebody had a watch and they were keeping track. Now, a healthy person can probably do push-ups for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. I had the flu coming out both ends. I did push-ups for 45 minutes.
Wow.
How? Because I didn't have the limitation of time. I didn't have the limitation of, oh, I'm only supposed to do this much. I just kept on doing that. One of the first things that you have to do to become a Navy SEAL, you go through Bud School, is you have to do 1,000 push-ups. You're not going to do 1,000 if you think 1,000. The boulder's too big, like in Indiana Jones. So you do 100, 100, 100, 50, 50, 25 until you get to one more. And
Chunk
I
it down.
learned through the Marine Corps is break it down into bite-sized pieces,
Hmm.
and that your mind is going to say, ow, back off when your body is capable of 20 times more. And
Hmm.
so I learned to separate pain from suffering and tune into the pain as a superpower. And if we look at that as a superpower, as a megaphone, It's there to help us, not hinder us. And that's really what I learned in the Marine Corps, is to remove the limiting beliefs and tune into the one that's uplifting and carrying you to multiple next levels.
So that's fascinating. And one thing I'm really curious about. So you mentioned in the Marine Corps, one of the first things that they're essentially doing is helping you to tear down the current identity, our current perception of ourself, which really ultimately comes down to all of our values, our beliefs, our rules that we put in place for how we navigate life and circumstances and ultimately make the decisions that will lead us one direction or another. For you, once that wall was torn down, when did you realize now I have the opportunity to decide who I want to become? And how did you navigate that journey? I mean, what led to those conscious or unconscious decisions that led to the man that you are today?
Great question. I would say in that, um, when we have a clean slate, one of the unique things about the Marines is the United States Marines is the only military branch in the world that says once a Marine, always a Marine. It was an identity that no one could take once I earned that title, right?
Mhm.
And so what I learned in life is that, and Steve Linder, if you know who he is, kind of talks about identities. And he goes, in adolescence, we're identity A. Then I go in the Marine Corps and I become identity B. But we don't drop A. We become A plus B plus C, and we keep growing. And
Mhm.
so the beginning of that was the ability to say, I get to choose. Do I want to ride on the coattails? Do I want to just get by? Or do I want to lead? And I just had to make a decision. The reason I went in, and I remember my mother was shocked when I said I was going to go in the Marines, and she asked why. And the answer I gave there was the same answer of why anybody ever says, I'm going to go do an Ironman. There's no logical reason to ever do an Ironman. Okay. The answer I gave my mother, why the Marines, I said, because I can. There's something inherent, I think, in certain people. And George Bernard Shaw said it was the origin, but Robert Kennedy Jr. said, or Sr. said, some people see things as that they are and ask why. Others dream of things that have never been and ask why not. And I think you choose early in life, or maybe you're born into it. I'm not sure, but I'm a why not person, right? So I'm like, I'm here. Why not be the best? If I have to go to combat, if I have to do the ultimate, I want to be prepared. And so it really kind of is like in that identity, Bruce Lee said, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And so I choose to be a gardener in the way I walk in life, but I prepare the sword if I'm ever called to war, to be that warrior. And so we choose to build on that. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I quickly realized some of the skills in the civilian world didn't translate well. And so I learned I needed to drop some of the qualities of being a Marine and hold on to those that translated into the civilian world, right? And so I learned as I moved around jobs, as I moved around careers, as I moved from military to civilian world, from civilian to elected official, what are the characteristics to retain? What are the ones to put on the sideline and let go? And in which environment are we called to play in a legendary way?
Mm. That's fascinating. That leads me to a question that you and I were discussing a little bit beforehand. So, I mean, you talk about the journey from Marines to Microsoft. My brother's a project manager at Microsoft, ironically, and it's an interesting world there. I will say that. But he actually does enjoy his job for the most part and does quite well. Him and I took very divergent paths when you talk about the birth order complexes and everything. We were kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, but still have those unique parallels. But from there to you've worked with some really really big names and gone on to develop an incredible name for yourself. I'm curious about some of the experiences that you've had with other leaders, and the word that I chose to use when we were talking earlier is a certain level of disintegration.
Mhm.
The things that they profess on stage or to the world or in their coaching and development programs, they haven't necessarily fully embodied, let alone started to consistently execute and integrate into their day-to-day life and strategies. And I'm curious, what were some of your observations that led you to the level of awareness that you had today and to develop the type of coaching and consulting programs that you have? And how have those insights, really allowed you to catapult the lives of your clients to another level?
Sure. Um, One of the challenges I had in the Marine Corps was you really don't have you literally sign away your constitutional rights, okay? And
Mhm.
as part of that, you don't have a voice. It's do as I say, like your parents, do as I say, not as I do. And I found these leaders just in large part incompetent. And they said, Cooper, you know what your problem is? And I said, just one, sir. And they said, no, that's another one, but we're not going to go there, right? They said, your problem is you're too smart. You ask the right question, and nobody wants to answer the question because it's going to compromise the decisions that they have to make that they know are wrong, but they can't do anything to stop it.
Wow.
And he said, in fact, you're too smart. I don't know why you're enlisted. You should be an officer. No, you're too smart for being an officer. Get the hell out of here, go to the university, and move on with your life. He said, there's people here because this is all they have. You have choices. You served your country, you're clear to go. And so Clinton came in and offered early outs, and long story behind that, but I went to school and got my degree. So that was kind of the beginning of me kind of noticing people who are in positions of authority that really have no leadership skills. They're managers, right?
Mm.
And then I noticed in Microsoft when I went there, the the true desire at the early stages to say, we want to hear your voice. We want to know how to shape these things. We know that we're better together. And then they got to a point when Steve Ballmer came in. And I always joke is the day I announced I was retiring, so did Bill Gates. And I said, well, Bill said, Chad, if you're not here, I can't do this anymore. And I'm surprised. People are like, really? I'm like, no, no, not really. Okay. But what happened was I saw a company that valued everybody's experience and wisdom to check boxes. We don't want to know from you. We know better. And so what I saw was a company that went from that to kind of the behavior of when a king begins acting like a king, it's not long before somebody else becomes king. And that's what happened. And
Mm.
so I said, I'm going to leave while I still have a love for this company, and I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to go be the primary for our son while my wife she understood the politics of corporate world. She thrived in that, and she was amazing. She's brilliant in that way. You're going to go make good money. Let me go do this. And I found let's pioneer something that hadn't been done at the time, and that was the man to stay home and let the woman go be the breadwinner, right? And so that worked really well during the years of my son being raised. He went off to university, empty nester, all those things. But I found in that, in observing people, that what people say and what people do, there's an old Marine Corps phrase, do you walk the walk or talk the talk? And I found most people talk the talk, but they don't back their words by behavior and action. And so I saw that as I worked with some really high profile celebrities, what was going on stage was very incongruent behind the scenes, right? And so I made a decision at that point that there's an opportunity to coach and serve people of what is your foundation? What's your epistemology? What are your values, your moral compass? And does that actually match your behavior? And the reason for that was very selfish, Zach. I figured if I'm going to do this job raising our son, if anybody's going to screw him up, it's going to be me. So I wanted to instill those values into him, and he's turned out to be an amazing man.
Mhm. That's really interesting on so many levels. I mean, there's one thing that really, well, multiple things, but there's one thing that really stood out to me, and it was the moment that you said, and I don't know, I'm assuming it was some level of superior, but the moment in the military when your career was concluding with them, and they had said, "You're smart, you should become an officer. Actually, you're too smart. You need to get out and go get an education and start your own business or pursue whatever you want to pursue." And they also said that there are other people that this is all they will have. And what I find fascinating about that is that's a very polarizing statement. I mean, on one hand, he's recognizing something in you, and that's a beautiful gift. Now, on the other hand, they're building a metaphorical container around a certain audience, in essence, saying that this is the only thing that they're ever capable of being. And knowing what I know of you, I wouldn't expect that you would believe that that's the case with anybody. I mean, human potential to me is almost limitless. You know, what are your thoughts on that experience? And did that play a part in how you start leading and got, or how you are leading and guiding people today?
Absolutely. So I understand where you're going with that, and that is really, are some people like designed and created to just be at this level? No, they choose to. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in that choice, one of the things I learned to kind of close the loop on the previous is I observed when I went into, and it really was solidified when I became an elected official, like had to run a campaign, had to be chosen, wasn't appointed. And when I became an elected official, I came in and I had an amazing mentor that was the most respected person in the community. And he taught me, Chad, never forget the org chart. The people are at the top. We are the janitors at the bottom. And the day that you forget that, the day you start acting like you're a king, is the day that you need to step aside. Okay. And so, in that is understanding we have choice on where we want to go. Whether we want to be at the top or bottom is large part about real leadership, Zach.
Hmm.
The real leaders I watch, like you have managers in positions of authority, and they're morons. No disrespect. Actually,
It's
with
true.
disrespect, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's just call it tight.
Mm-hmm.
But the real leaders, the real kings, are those that are servant leader. They don't come over top their people, they come alongside. We know that story about King Arthur. King Arthur was a servant king. Jesus was a servant king. Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, on and on, right? They didn't come over people. And so when we come alongside, we can look at that and say, okay, how do we understand that? To now directly answer your question is, it is my understanding that the two greatest gifts that I have been given by whatever you want to call the man above, okay, universe, God, whatever that is, the greatest gift we were given was the gift of love. The second greatest gift is the gift of choice. And we need to choose carefully and wisely. So we have a choice. Why? Why not? Well, why not doesn't really go well in the military. They can't have a democracy. They know they can't compromise. So a why not is really not a great place for a person to go in. As an elected official, why not can be a really powerful gift of curiosity with respect. And so people kind of look at that, and we need the people that say why, right? Versus why not. Okay. Go do this. Why? Because I said so. Okay. So we're choosing to say, this is as far as I want to go. Now, maybe that's a hard reality for some people to accept, but it's been through my research, through a lot of other respected leaders, and my own understanding. 87% of the planet chooses to remain ignorant and just wants to be entertained. It's not from a place of judgment that I say that, it's from a place of experience and observation, right? Why do we see so many people addicted to social media, to their smartphone? Because they want to remain, I don't want to know the truth. Truth is what liberates us, but it initially pisses us off. So we'd rather actually feel safe, even though it's not, to just be entertained. It takes courage to choose to say, I'm going to go further, I'm going to lean into this, and I'm inviting anybody else who wants to come.
Hmm. You know, superficially, it's safety. And I think inherently, um, really what it is avoiding being with your own thoughts. And people fear the conversations that they may be having with themselves, and the hard awareness that they may have to face about the discomfort that they are experiencing in their life. Um,
Yeah.
that said, you know, there's in a moment I want to talk about or touch on our conversations around spirituality and the convergence between business and spirituality. But before we touch on that, there's one thing that I love about you, Chad. It's just the authenticity. I mean, you are who you are. You know who you are. You show up consistently as that person in every single conversation. And one thing I heard you touch on is many leaders, whether it's an owner, executive level position, the president, whatever, many leaders start to lead how they believe they should be leading, but
Mhm.
not necessarily in a way that's authentic or congruent with the person that they are. And how does that, in your experience, affect their ability to really lead effectively? And where can that create problems, challenges, things that they don't necessarily want to be facing in other facets of their lives?
So that began in high school. I was in French class. And my French teacher, she just had a throwaway statement when I was learning some phrase in French, right? And I said, "Well, that's stupid." And she goes, "It's not stupid. It's different. And if you
Mm.
will reserve your judgment and be open, you might see how that actually works." It was a throwaway statement by her. Like 20 years later, I saw her in a grocery store and I said, "That throwaway statement changed my life forever." Because it allowed me when I went into the Marine Corps. Look, I grew up with three sides of my high school were surrounded by cornfields, okay? Small rural. The first black family that moved in, they burned a cross on their yard. This is in the 80s. Shouldn't be happening. Still happening. Second family, same thing. So I grew up with a very small-minded world. I get thrown into the Marine Corps where your background, your economic means, your gender, none of that mattered. Only thing that matters is can you achieve the objective, right? And so I learned that diversity is a strength. But in order for us to do that, we have to actually be curious. And that curiosity, we have to refrain judgment in whether we agree and first get curious to understand. And so I had multiple teachers teach me reserve your judgment and first seek to understand. Then at the end of that, you may or may not agree, but we can respect that we understand each other. And I carried that in as an elected official that I would just choose. One of the things that I really um, found unprofessional was the typical political, "I hear what you're saying, let me get back to you." I'd actually say, "Help me understand your perspective." And at the end of it, I may agree or disagree, but at least I understand. And I'm going to explain why I'm going to vote yes or no based on that. And people would respond with, "I don't like that you're not going to go with this, but I respect it," right? It wasn't the popular vote. So, how do we do that? I learned coming out of the military, one of the things that didn't translate well was that directness. I had to learn first to learn how to love myself. That's where it began. Buddha said you can't give what you first don't possess within yourself. So how am I supposed to love if I actually don't love myself? And so I went through a lot of work to learn to genuinely love myself. Then the unfiltered, direct, abrasive Chad would come out, and people are like, "Whoa, too much." So I learned how to have discernment. I learned the difference between speaking your truth through love and empathy or compassion and speaking your truth. So if we go back to Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, both of them spoke their truth. Neither of them spoke their truth through love and compassion, right? The difference was people didn't trust one of them. So they said, based on the lesser of two evils, I don't like the directness because both of them are riddled in judgment, but one of them is really somebody I don't trust. That's how he won the first election with Hillary. Okay. I learned I have a responsibility and I pre-frame to people, look, I'm about to respond to what you need to hear. But I'm going to tell you, because of my history in the Marine Corps and because of my time as an elected official, I am relentlessly direct about the problem. So if you see me being abrasively direct, I am direct on getting the outcome. I am compassionate and empathetic on the person. So if you see me attacking, I'm attacking the problem. I'm not attacking you. I learned I had to do that because of the way that I show up, because of the presence that I come off in my history. That was my responsibility. So people would actually drop the wall and go, oh, he cares about me so much that he's not going to pull punches. And very few people do that. So I learned how to do that. And then I also learned to cease judgment and first seek to understand. You do those two things, you can come alongside people and you can lead anybody anywhere, no matter how hard that is. They will climb mountains because you're inspiring them. Those are some really critical elements or characteristics of real leaders today.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think about the times that I've had the most significant impact. And it was when I was willing to say from a place of love the things that I never thought I would say to somebody. And it was coming from a place of utmost transparency. And to your point, attacking the problem, not the person, and from a foundation of love. And every single time, those led to the greatest transformations.
Let's
And
make sure, though, in that, Zach, let's not confuse that truth has got soft edges.
oh,
It
yeah.
may still be a bitter, stinging
Hmm.
pill, but
Hmm.
people understand that you're telling them the truth. It's up to them whether they want to accept it or not, and you're not
Hmm.
judging them, regardless of whether they say, I accept responsibility or I'm going to go victim. What they do with it is up to them.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's there's a particular moment that's coming to mind. I'm not going to delve into the story as I know we're getting short on time. What I would love to talk about is if you would speak to a little bit more to our conversation earlier about the convergence between spirituality and business and what that means to you and how that will lead to a greater transformation for business leaders, owners, executives, and what that looks like.
Sure. So there's two things I can share that you don't hear from people that are put in positions of high performance and leadership responsibility. Like literally when people ask, what title do you want? I say chief janitor. And they think I'm joking. I'm like, look, being a leader is the willingness to sweep the floor if that's what needs to be done, or scrub the toilet if that needs to be done. A leader is not above getting outcomes, right? Let's not confuse activity with outcomes. So when we look at that, titles really don't matter to people who are really committed to be a servant leader. Okay. They're too busy getting outcomes than to worry about their image to a certain degree. But I'll tell you two things that you don't ever hear that are like, a, come on back behind the scenes and see what real leaders really do. They do two things. One, Henry Ford, when he was put on trial and they tried to make him look like an idiot, said, well, you don't even have a high school degree. In fact, you don't even have a middle school degree. How can you be responsible or be relied on to run this multi-million-dollar company at the time? He says, well, based on that, you shouldn't. They said, aha. And he said, but I have a box on my desk with two buttons. And all I need to know is which button to push, and it brings in somebody who does know the answer. So real leaders don't pretend. They don't profess to have all the answers. So what do? In these situations, I'm sitting on a computer. I allow myself to go, I know where the answer is, Zach, and I have a laundry list. It's called technology. It indexes. I can type in one word and it goes, boom, here's your answer. So people who sit on the stage and are like all knowing, I am like, holy crap, inspired by that. I'm not that smart. So I keep the technology. I have a database of knowledge that all I have to know is one keyword and go, here's the wisdom of somebody before me. Let me use and leverage that, right? When a king starts acting like a king, that's from the traveler's gift. I
Mhm.
didn't write it. I'm not the origin. We don't have to be the author to be able to serve and be impactful. So I don't take credit for it. And to that, the second piece is like, stop trying to be a poser and act like you're so knowledgeable and just tell people, give me a second. I know where to get the answer, or I know who to call in and leverage the wisdom of other people. That's what King Solomon did. The second is King Solomon in real leaders. If you look at the statistics, entrepreneurs, hands down, are far more religious than other people. So all of my teaching, all of my coaching, all of it is grounded in a faith-based background. I just remove the barriers that cause people's walls go up. Look, the reality is the church has hurt a lot of people in recent times. So I remove all of that and I just go to delivering the wisdom to the point where it's like you're out fishing, you hook them, they're like, where did you get that? Oh, that's in scripture. So coming alongside people is meeting them where they are. I was leading a team down in Guatemala where my foundation's been serving for 20 years. And I have this guy come up and he goes, look, man, I've been serving for 25 years in my own foundation. I really enjoy not having to lead. He goes, but this is a faith-based group, right? I said, yeah, you know that it is. He goes, yeah, but I have to ask, your faith is Christianity. And you've got Jews, you've got atheists, you've got Christians. Where in the heck did you learn to invite everybody? I said, oh, I learned it from a guy a long time ago. He goes, really? Who? I said, Jesus. He's like, touche.
Mhm.
Right? We don't have to go out and be that hypocritical, like here, dude, I miss the mark all the time. What is the Greek origin of to sin? To miss the mark. I don't know how many times I've missed the mark in this interview, in this conversation, but I know I have. So I just let go of the rules and the pressure of having to do it right. And I just accept I'm doing it wrong most of the time, but I'm that endurance athlete that I will get to the finish line. Even if it takes me longer, I will get there. And I hope that I can bring a crowd of people with me to celebrate their successes and mine. So I just don't try to be above people. I try to come alongside and go, I get it. I'm struggling with my own crap. You're struggling with yours. Maybe we can serve each other and figure out a way forward together.
Mm. What a beautiful message. I mean, it resonates with me on a really high level because, I didn't have one of those early transformative experiences outside, like joining the military, outside of taking over a business at 19. And it was, I broke every rule in modern day leadership that you could possibly do. I mean, it was very much top down leadership, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, all the things, but there was a feeling of discontent, of disgust, of just, I knew that it wasn't the person that I wanted to show up as, nor that it was going to lead me to the outcomes that I wanted to create. And it was just a constant chipping away at identifying the patterns and the way I was showing up and self-analysis and reflecting on conversations and investing in other leadership courses and workshops, and ultimately surrounding myself with other people that are living the way that I wanted to be living, that really helped to create that transformation. I mean, it wasn't just something where I flipped a switch and all of a sudden you're a fantastic leader. You got to make a lot of mistakes. And the reality is, to your point, we're going to continue to. It's just what you do next. Do you take extreme ownership? Can you step back and lead side by side and help the people around you to level up? Can you lean into who, not how? I mean, I know for me, it was one of those beliefs that was conditioned from a very young age. Oh, Zach, you're smart. You can do all this stuff on your own. So I thought I had to. I didn't realize that, oh, wow, a really effective leader surrounds themselves with other brilliant people and helps them be the ones that step into the spotlight and become even better and more proficient in what they do, challenges them to level up and lean into their own levels of discomfort. And it was just such a incredible gift. And I'm really grateful that you shared all these stories today, because I know our listeners will gain a tremendous amount from it. As we conclude, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So a third characteristic, look at great leaders, and they all have a sense of humor. The Dalai Lama has a sense of humor, right? Look at them, they have a wicked sense of humor. And to your point of like, leaders aren't born, they're made, right? So I'm going to use an example of yours talking. I'm like, oh, Jerry Seinfeld, okay? The great philosopher Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, right? He says, you don't need to know anything, Zach. Everything you need to know, you'll figure out when you need to know it. Even if you miscalculate and make the wrong decision, you needed to know that. Pain is knowledge rushing in to fill the gap. When you stub your toe on the foot of the bed, that was a gap in knowledge. So those mistakes, supposedly, that you're saying that you made weren't mistakes. They were knowledge rushing in to say, oh, don't do that again. Great. The question isn't whether we experience these. The question is whether we learn from them and mature from them and take responsibility. As King Solomon said, when an honest man realizes he's mistaken, he'll either cease being mistaken or cease being honest.
Yeah, that's a brilliant quote. Now, expand on one thing you said, just
like, crap,
briefly. Yeah, well, I know, yeah, but I'm like, this is too good. humor. I would have to imagine that there is a significant number of leaders that have become or fallen into the trap of being so analytical that they forget, might be the best way to put it, how to have a little bit of fun and bring a bit of genuine humor into conversations. Like, are there any, you know, I don't know if there's a tip or a strategy or a framework, if that's even the best way to look at it, but how can people bring more humor into into their leadership and just day-to-day life?
The way that I look at it, like HR, when they see me, man, they turn around and just walk the other direction. They're just like, oh my gosh, this guy's such a train wreck.
I get
And
that.
I'm
Yeah.
notorious for like, I don't ever want to have HR in my company. Why?
Mhm.
Because we need to have enough responsibility to understand to err is to be human. We're going to screw up. Do we understand and agree? No. Do we understand and make corrections? I hope so. Those are the people I want to know pushing those boundaries and realizing when they went too far, realizing when they didn't go far enough. I learned in the service that pain is one of the ingredients to success, Zach. You can to avoid suffering, you laugh your butt off. We can get in a ditch, get dirt and sweat all over us, fall into bed exhausted. But if we laugh along the way, we are restored and we're not worn out. So we can do hard things, we can do painful things, and as long as we laugh, we go, it's worth it. Nobody gets out alive. We might as well laugh our butt off in the process of working our butt off. That's how winning is done. So
Mhm.
lighten up. You know the boundaries between, how far is too much. And it's called sensory acuity. It's called
Mhm.
emotional intelligence and
Mhm.
social intelligence and intellectual intelligence. Figure it out. And when you go too far, go, oh, my bad. Saturday Night Live, the Chad, right? Is, oh, my bad.
I love that idea. Eradicate HR. And it's interesting because the organizations that I've seen that have followed that philosophy, they're the ones that I feel like have created more of a genuine culture, and not in the terms of having to try and fit it into some kind of a framework, but what a culture is embodying the leader that shows up in front of them. I mean, you either consciously or unconsciously develop a set of values, beliefs, communication styles, how we work together. And the ones that have been the most fun are where that leader shows up as the person that they are, and they are willing to make mistakes, and they are willing to take ownership and continue to try and grow. So that's a really,
Yeah.
really keen observation.
Again, we've had some similar people in our paths as
Hmm. Hmm.
mentors. What was going on behind the scenes was not congruent,
Hmm.
on stage. A gentleman who did a masterpiece in this is one of my heroes,
Yeah.
is Ray Dalio.
Yeah.
This book, Principles, is actually two books.
Hmm.
And in the first is about the character and values of a company. And his legal team had a heyday because he said, look, we're going to record every single meeting. And the attorney said, you're going to be exposed. If you make a mistake, now you're liable. And he says, yes. And we will own that mistake. And if we have to pay for it, we will pay for it. But what we won't do is hide from it because that fosters the wrong culture. We will stand and own our errors. And if we enable this, then people are going to come in with the wrong values. To err is to be human. But now that it's being recorded, guess what? Now you're going to take responsibility and think about it before it comes out. You can do that and still have humor,
Hmm.
but be responsible. That's where Ray's saying you don't need HR. You just need respect and responsibility and understanding.
Mm. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, Chad, thank you for spending your time with us on the Perpetual Growth Podcast. Big shout out to you today, Chad. You brought a tremendous amount of value to today's conversation. Where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, thanks for asking. As you and I know, I'm in the process of building the content library of all of this in bite-sized pieces. So what we're looking to do, just go to chadecooper.com, okay? And you're going to find everything there. Much of it isn't really ready to be released, but subscribe, keep looking back. What we want to do, Zach, is we want to take the library of these high performers that are charging high ticket sales, 30, 50,000, and we're breaking it down and going to make it accessible and like a really ridiculously affordable subscription to the developing parts of the world. So we're not going to say, oh, in the developed part of the world, we're going to charge you more. We're going to say this is the price across the board. But it begins with just go out, start tuning into some of these other interviews that you'll see on the website. Buy the book if you want something there. But stay tuned. We're going to be bringing this out, and our goal is to reach masses by bringing this at an affordable price that even developing parts of the world are so hungry to consume but can't afford it.
What a cool gift. I mean, democratize the knowledge and make it accessible to everybody. That's incredible. Well, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, leave a review to help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. We'll see you next time. Chad, thanks again for joining us today.